I was talked into coming to Sanibel by Betty Sears, who wanted to come down to take over or to help with her family's business, and that was in the 1954. I did not have to think too long and hard about the coming down, except that I had never seen Sanibel. I had grown up in Minnesota and I knew I didn't like mosquitoes in hot weather. But I said I would try, and I came. It took 5 years to get to enjoy mosquitoes and not have them trouble me. And here I am, some 30, 40 years later.
I'm Barbara Billheimer. My husband and I came down in 1953 to take over some little cottages, housekeeping cottages, that my father had built. And I persuaded Betty to come down the next year to open a restaurant.
Oh, over to me.
Over to you.
I'm Betty Sears. I'm the one that came down with Evelyn Pearson to open the restaurant. It appeared that there were no facilities for feeding tourists on the island at that point. You can't believe it now, can you? And the motel and hotel owners very much needed somebody who could provide meals on demand rather than just just standard meals, American plan, which some of them had. So here I am.
I'd have to think back to that time that Island Inn and all of the hotels closed their food service during the summer months. They were in operation only during the high season months, which left the cottage owners who wanted to have full-time work in need of a restaurant and restaurants.
The only other competition that I can remember at that time was Jack Cole's, which is now Harbor House. Mm-hmm. And that was a very small restaurant. The inns were open, Casa and the Island Inn were open in the summer, as you said, but winter rather, but closed in the summer. So unless people brought food and cooked their own meals, they were out of business, except for Jack Cole's.
And you had to have a kind of a grocery store in your basement, didn't you, as I remember it?
Well, pretty much so, because Francis Bailey was not open on Sunday, and they closed at, 5 or 6 o'clock, I think, at night.
Some ridiculous hour.
So there just wasn't very much that you could do about food, unless you brought your own, which a lot of people did, of course, but it wasn't what we needed, was a restaurant. So they opened a restaurant at the Casa Marina at the ferry landing. They rented the restaurant from Ernest Kinsey and operated that until when?
Till 56, till 57. 57. What did we pay in rent? Some ridiculous.
We paid, yes, Betty, I came down and then promptly flew back home to be at the baptism for one of my nieces, because I needed to be the godmother. When Betty stayed for that week and cleaned up the Casa Marina and along with Charlotte Kinsey, now Charlotte Kinsey White, and the two of them dug the grease and the dirt and the filth out of the restaurant so we could open it while I played for a week. But we got back and we opened up the restaurant in early December of 1954. We paid at that time $35 a month for the rental of the restaurant building. The low rental was set because we were also providing a service for the ferries. Ernest Kinsey needed to have some place where his customers could use the bathroom facilities and could have food and to get away from the mosquitoes and to have a place to wait while they were waiting for the ferries. At that time, cars were in line for the ferries going back to the mainland. We had to be open during the ferry hours, and that was from 8:30 in the morning until 5:30 at night. From then on, we could serve dinners on our own and that was, we could be open or closed as we chose to be. He did allow us to have 1 day free, which we tried for 2 weeks to open, to work 7 days a week, and that was not for us. So we were allowed to close on Thursdays, the 1 day when we didn't have any produce or milk and so forth coming in, that where we had to be there. Charlotte Kinsey rented her house on Sanibel, a small house, to us for $50 a month, and that was in the area of the Casa Marina, or what is now Ferry Road. So we had housing.
Does that house still exist? I think
Yes,
it
it's
does.
still there. It's a part of Casablanca, and is being used as a rental unit. And then within a year, we knew we had to have some kind of help. And the first person that we had for help, I believe, was Lena Billheimer.
I think my husband's mother, my mother-in-law,
Yeah.
she was the hostess.
Yeah, she came down and hostess cashier for us, because
Type
she had to,
menus and all kinds of things.
and Lena had to have a place to stay, so she lived with us that winter.
Right.
In Charlotte's house. And the first real employee we had was Petey.
Pearl West.
Pearl West helped us for a little.
Pearl West helped us for a while, and Queenie Hurst, who worked at the Island Inn, but the Island Inn lent her to us. And Queenie was a host in herself. She was a great gal. She was the one that taught us about the mosquitoes. Queenie would sit outside on a log under a tree and fan herself and read the papers. We got the papers from Hartford, where we had previously lived. And Queenie was fascinated by the society pages because they featured a lot of colored people. Colored, we called them then. Black, they call themselves now. Anyway, Queenie used to sit out there, and we'd say, "Queenie, how can you stand it?" The mosquitoes would be, you can't say black on her face because she was black, but anyway, all over her. And she'd say, "It's all right, this is their place. When I'm inside, they ain't allowed to come, but outside they can do as they please." So she would take herself off there.
Queenie is still alive, and she's a dear friend,
Yeah. She's no longer working. She lives over in Harlem Heights, I think, or
I don't know where she
lives. But anyway, we see her once in a while on the street, happily. And Pearl West came to help us, I think, the night we opened. Didn't we borrow her from somebody?
Oh, I can't remember.
Anyway,
you have better memory than I do.
But you were starting to talk about P.D. King.
Well, Petey King was a high school student at the time, and he would come and he was our first waiter, and he would wash dishes for us at night. He organized us rather than we organizing him. Petey was the son of Frank King, who operated
Las Conchas del Mar.
Yes,
Which
as
is
their
not
own
a shell
business, but
basket.
also he started out on island. The family started out on island at Sanibel. And Petey was a very, very bright and a very able young man.
Lots of personality.
Yeah, you remember we'd come in the door and he'd say, "Well, girls, what kind of squash do we have tonight?" As far as he was concerned, all vegetables were squash, and he didn't care for any of them. But he'd get the menu straight in his head, and so he could spiel it off to the customers, which he did. Petey was a kid with great finesse.
Yes. And then on dishes, he would say when washing Betty said, "That isn't clean. I give them 3 swipes around, and that ought to be enough."
That's enough for any dish.
They had no dishwasher.
Oh,
They had
heavens,
no
no.
automatic dishwasher. They had to do everything by hand. Everything had to be washed by hand. No sinks.
You used to help too.
Yes.
Everybody helped. The whole
I
family
helped.
pitched in.
Oh, what an operation.
Then after a while, we got Ruth and Lizzie.
Uh-huh. Ruth and Lizzie came over on the ferries and did our dishes for us and waited tables, etc. We lasted at the down there for 3 years. In the meantime, we also had a friend of Betty's who wanted to come down and work with us, and so in order to have her, we had to build a house. So we built our first house on Sanibel in the Colony area, and had built it with 2 bedrooms and a bath, and then a small guest apartment so that we could have somebody there, namely my parents, if they would come down. And Betty's friend lived in that house before we did.
That was Myrtle Carney. She came down with her son Butch, who was entrenched with the island, and a good friend of Johnny Billheimer, as I remember. Butch was younger, but Butch thought Johnny was just the greatest.
What period of time are we talking about?
We're talking about 1954 through 57, or
Okay.
to 57, yeah.
Then you moved to the Nutmeg house. You built the Nutmeg house.
And we
Oh my
built the
God.
Nutmeg house, we talked to Ernest Kinsley and indicated to him that we had to have some massive changes in the Casa Marina in order to continue working there. We needed to put in an electric dishwasher rather than a hand dishwasher because, as you know, dishes cannot be sterilized easily and well if you wash dishes by hand. We need to put on a new roof because the roof was leaking everywhere, and every time it rained we had to get all of our large pots and pans and put them various places where the water was coming in. There were several things that had to be done. So we talked to Ernest and said that we would be willing to stay there if he would give us a 10-year lease so that we could put these things into operation, or if he would want to do it for us and charge us more rent. He thought it over and decided he did not want to do either. He did not want to give us a lease because he felt the leases only help the lessee rather than the lessor. So we thought it over, and then we talked to him and said, well, Ernest, we think then we will try and build a restaurant of our own.
Well, that was fine with Ernest, because by that time we had sort of cleaned up his reputation. People that had had the Casa Marina before had done a dirty, sloppy job as far as we were concerned.
Well,
And
they'd left the restaurant.
it left a good taste in people's mouths, and he could close up the Casa Marina and let them buy their food farther down the island at the Nutmeg house. So.
We parted friends and have been friends with the Kinsey family over all these years.
Yeah, where to put a new restaurant was the next thing.
Of course, we wanted it up on the Gulf, close to
High tide, yeah, so that
close to
they're
our cottages. And there were several other cottages up there by that time.
Mhm.
And so I think my mother gave you a lot up there, is that it?
Well, that was the last bit, because we worked with Priscilla Murphy to find land, and she
showed us all kinds of places.
But all of the pieces that she showed us were not ideal for a restaurant operation.
And
the one that she particularly would like us to have was over by Bailey's store on Rabbit Road, but in back of Bailey's store, and she
No,
said
Bailey's store isn't on Rabbit Road. What are you talking about?
I don't mean Rabbit
Bailey
Road,
Road.
I mean
Bailey Road.
no,
Tarpon Bay?
where Bailey's store is now, Tarpon Bay
Tarpon
Road,
Bay Road.
and back over there.
Oh,
She said there would be.
It's out of this world. And we said, sure is out of this world. It's right over in the swamp. And she agreed that it was.
By today's standard, we would never have been allowed to build there.
No, right in the wetlands.
But Priscilla thought this would be a lovely, lovely spot. But she never did find a place for us because people were afraid of having a restaurant in the area of homes.
Yeah, not in my backyard.
And we understood that.
So when Mother had this piece of property, which she had bought in conjunction with Ernest Kinsey way back when for a phenomenally low price as far as Gulf front land goes,
I think it was $5,000.
$5,000, something like that, for 100 feet on the Gulf. And I forget whether she gave it. Yes, I guess she did give it to us.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we went ahead and put the restaurant there. So, and it was just a quarter of a mile from high tide, which made everybody happy.
Yes,
And
indeed.
but we also searched the neighborhood or talked to the neighborhood and the people involved as to whether they would mind our doing it. And yeah, our immediate neighbors did not have a problem with our putting a restaurant there because we were going to be serving only night meals and no liquor. We were just going to be a small restaurant operation, and it remained that.
Mhm.
And it still is today a very small operation.
Well,
Yeah.
not for the restaurant business, or have you got more to say on the restaurant? Maybe we should let.
Well, I was thinking you were talking about the mosquitoes, and they're unbelievable. But when I first came here, the only telephone was in a little tiny shack in back of the post office, which was right down next to the Casa Marina restaurant that you had originally. That was the only telephone. And in order to make a long distance call, you had to come down there and anoint yourself with mosquito repellent and stand out there and swish and swat and wait to get through on the line. And shortly after that, we got telephones, though.
That was the year,
That's right, I forgot.
in December, telephones came in December of 1954 when we came down.
Or was that it?
And there were 24 telephones on our
Yeah,
24
three lines of eight on each line,
And we
party
heard-
lines.
And we heard one ring.
Mhm.
But that was luxury. And if anybody needed a doctor at any of the various little motels, cottages, we would all get on the telephone and call up and down and see who had a doctor staying there, and it was very convenient to have a telephone.
Yeah, whether he had a license to practice in Florida
Yes.
was immaterial.
Well, probably not, but
After a bit, we had two doctors on the island. We got real lucky. We had Dr. Baker and Dr. Baker. One lived on the beach and one lived up off Wolford,
Wolford.
off Wolford Ridge. Yeah, so they were aptly named Dr. Beach Baker and Dr. Jungle Baker. And of course, I don't know whether they were licensed to practice in Florida or not, but you went with the $10 in your palm and eased it over before you left.
Beach Baker
Was licensed.
licensed in Florida. I don't think Jungle Baker
Dr.
was.
Jungle Baker was, but anyway, he was very good about seeing people. When one of our employees cut his foot badly, why we sent him up to Dr. Jungle Baker, I well remember. Drive him up, bleeding and everything. Not badly though. He survived.
Mm. The roads also were something else. They were, first time I came down here, which was, oh goodness, well, I came in 53, it must have been 49. I came down to visit my parents, who had high tide originally, and the roads were all sand or dirt roads. There were no paved roads. Even the Sand Cap Road was a dirt road, and washboardy. The Tarpon Bay Road was a dirt road and full of potholes.
And low too.
And low. When there was a bad storm, it would be underwater. In fact, Donald Hires caught a snook in the yard of the colored schoolhouse, which is now the schoolhouse gallery.
Well, that was
It was so low.
No, that was in 1957 when we were building the Nutmeg House. That fall, there was rain in there, and that
Storm.
road was
Torrential rain.
Tarpon Bay Road was
Yeah.
Underwater.
underwater.
And Rabbit Road, talk about floods. Try to get through Rabbit Road, you needed a good boat. The school bus used to make it sometimes by spewing water up and getting up a good head of steam at the beginning and zzz. But
Bow waves.
yeah, waves.
Well, Rabbit Road was a one-way road. It was just one lane,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and the bushes met overhead. So whoever got into it first had right of way. If somebody else pulled into it, they had to back up because it was so narrow and no way to turn out and go around anybody. But the roads gradually got paved. Buskell Drive finally got paved, and then we got the road along the beach closed. We had a road along the beach, a sand road, from Island into Casabel. We got that closed because that was dangerous for children.
And that was closed in about 1965 because we enlarged the Nutmeg house, I think, in the fall of 1965. And then we enlarged the restaurant the house, Nutmeg House, which the boys used to call it, and moved it, took the pilings and put the pilings on top of where the old road was, and then added on so we could take care of not only your mother, but my mother, Eve Nyberg, and Aunt Ruth.
My aunt. Yeah.
So we lived with 6 women in our house. So we had to add two extra bedrooms and an extra bathroom in order to cope.
This was just for the winter months.
Yeah.
In the winter.
But they were invaluable help in the restaurant. We couldn't have operated without them. We used to put up a list at night before we went home to bed. Because we closed the place up and it was late, have to be 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock before we got really tucked in. But we put up a list of everything we needed done. Well, the mothers and aunts and friends and so forth who lived with us would rise at an early hour for us and come over and get their paring knives sharpened up and their stools pulled up under the counter, and they would peel all kinds of things. Bushel of grapefruit Evelyn's mother used to peel in a day, and I don't know how many potatoes my mother did. She was great on potatoes. And some others were grape specialists or lettuce specialists or whatnot, and Barb used to come over and join them sometimes and wash things at the sink, so we'd get over and find 5 people happily working.
And chattering.
Yeah.
It's a social time.
Yeah, they loved it.
And then they served dinner. It was about 1 o'clock to anybody who was working there and wanted to stay for dinner.
That was all the leftovers from the night before.
And that was a glorious party too.
Yeah.
Then we'd all go home and take a nap.
Not us.
Then they would start working. Carry on through the night. And they employed all the, one after the other, all the little boys on the island, and maybe some of the girls too. I think you had lots of little kids. Well,
Yeah,
one at
yeah.
a time or 2 at a time, but
We worked our way through 2 families.
yes,
Gavin,
my family.
Your family, 3 families. Your family, because we had Johnny, and then we had Kim, and then we had Mike. And they were great later on. They were little at the time we're speaking of. Then we worked our way through the Wilds family from Captiva, starting out with Linda,
Linda, Pat,
Judy,
and Patsy.
Patsy, yeah. And then we worked our way through the Gavin family for dishwashers and busboys and whatnot. They were the black kids on the island. We started early with them and had a whole succession of them coming through. So we provided employment to the youth of the island.
And training.
Well,
Two
yes,
youngest boys
yeah.
are in the restaurant business here now as a result.
Yeah, your boys are. And how many Gavins are in the restaurant business? Well, not too many, I guess. How many Wileses are in the restaurant business? Well,
Yeah, they're there.
They're still up on Captiva working at Timmy's Nook, which is their family-owned place.
I think maybe they've lost some of the standards we started out with.
We think so, but we won't tell them.
But that was the training base of the whole
Yeah.
the whole island.
No, Kim and Mike, when about the time we closed, Mike was my right-hand man. I trained him how to cook steaks and how to make corn pudding and how to do this and that. And he was a great help to me.
Still is a
Yeah.
cook.
And he still is the cook
Part-time.
over there, yeah.
Yeah, you forgot the Jordans.
Well, I forgot
Oh,
the
yes,
Jordan
the
family, yeah.
Yes, and
Well, we had
Jim
two.
Jordan was one of your
Yeah, Jimmy Jordan was one of my cook
Special-
helpers.
yeah.
Specialists. I loved Jimmy because he was so tall and he could reach. One time when the roast lamb fell off the broiler and lodged behind against the wall, Jimmy was the only one in the place that was able to reach down and get it. We took care of it. We washed it off. Don't worry.
Jimmy was a nice boy.
Yeah, but all the kids used to have fun on the dish machine.
Jimmy always puts his arms around me and hugs me every time he sees me
No,
now.
we loved Jimmy and his wife and two little girls.
Kids, yeah.
Yeah. They're real sweethearts. And then we had Tony, who was around now, and we had,
No, that's all.
that's all.
Mozella's youngest we never had.
No, but we had the other one, the in-between one, for a while.
Oh, only for a few
A
days.
few
so-
days. He didn't like us, and we didn't like him much.
I didn't like the island, so he's been gone a long time.
Yeah, I'd be on a long
Yeah.
time. I don't know where he is now, but anyway.
Jimmy's a fixture on the island too.
But we had Timmy in another way, because we had Timmy, because Timmy helped us sing in the choir at St. Michael's Church. And that's a whole other story.
Yes, indeed. That was the in thing for children to do at that time.
To sing in the choir.
Sing in the Episcopal choir, and it didn't matter whether they were Catholic, Jewish, or what they
Or
were
what.
singing in the choir.
Yeah, we had up to 30 kids in the choir. sometime.
More kids than other.
Yeah, but they did all right. They did all right. And but I was going to say about Timmy. Timmy's mother Mozella was in the choir, and Timmy was practically born there. She carried him up till the 9 months were over, and then after he had been delivered, she used to bring him up to sing on Sundays with his batch of diapers and change him up there. So Timmy was a real St. Michael's kid.
Then you have to go on to tell them about Charlotta and how they practice their music in the
Oh,
bus.
Charlotta Carper, who was one of the Wiles girls who married Stephen Carper, drove the school bus, and she also sang in the choir. So she would start them down at the ferry landing, practicing the things for next Sunday, and the school bus would roll up Periwinkle Way with all these hymns resounding.
And it wasn't Stephen. Stephen is her son. She didn't marry Stephen Carper. Stephen
Oh,
is her
excuse me.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I was thinking about Stevie and his animal that he used to carry up in the choir loft, a great big fuzzy animal or whatnot that he couldn't relinquish, and we were always afraid it would drop down on somebody's head in the congregation, but didn't quite. Well, what is her husband's name?
Ken.
Ken Carper, of course.
Sure.
How could we forget?
Charlotte had a very nice voice, still does.
A lovely
Wish she
voice.
were still singing in the choir.
Yes, she wishes she were too, but she didn't have time for it. Too busy running Timmy's Nook, baking all the pies and working up there and supervising and whatnot. She's a great gal.
A lot. Of all of our kids, though, Oscar Gavin was the most highly organized and probably the most able. Billy Hughes was also able. Between the two of them, they were management type people. Oscar managed the whole crew, kitchen crew. He kept the kids in tow for us. He would say watch it or something to them when they were rambunctious if we were not in the kitchen, so that we could always rely on Oscar.
He took charge of the choir too. I remember he's handing out the hymn books, and one little kid says, "This isn't my book, it doesn't have my name on it." And Oscar says, "They're all the same inside, take it, we're in a hurry." So he would marshal the choir kids. A lovely tenor voice too. Every once in a while he used to be allowed to sing a solo in church. Wonder if Oscar still sings.
Haven't asked him about that.
He's too busy running his
Sings
plumbing
right
truck around the
along.
island.
Did he do plumbing for you?
No, he didn't do plumbing for us, but I remember we used to tell the kids, don't bother to go to college. Learn to be a plumber, they make more money.
True.
True, and some of them, Oscar took us at our word, and one other little kid, I remember, decided he was going to be a plumber. Well,
How about hurricanes? What experience did you have with hurricanes?
Well, we had many storms after we first moved down. And the first one we had was Little Hazel. And were you here then?
no, we weren't here for
When
that.
it came?
No,
That must have been 1953 then. It must have been the year before you came.
probably was.
And they had to take the ferries up the river, of course, and park the ferries way up the river, so we were stuck,
The Orange River.
yeah, and parked them out in the middle of the stream so they wouldn't bash against anything, but my husband and we were adding on to high tide, we were adding on 4 units, at that time. And my husband and the workmen had gone up the river, some of them had gone up the river or I'd gone to Punta Gorda, I guess, after lumber. Suddenly the hurricane blew up. Nobody knew it was coming. We had very little warning of hurricanes in those days. And so I was there with my mother-in-law and little boy and some of the work, 2 or 3 of the workmen, I guess, were there. And I didn't know what to do, really. But I drove down the beach. The beach road was still open to Martin Hires next door, and asked him what he was going to do. He said he was not going to board up. So I didn't board up. And at the height of the storm, I didn't know it was the height of the storm, about 10 o'clock in the morning, I decided I'd better board up because things were flying right and left, and you couldn't stand up. I couldn't stand up. So I got the men to put up the shutters on the cottages. And they had a terrible time doing it. And that turned out to be the height of the storm. So,
Great time to start boarding.
great time to start boarding.
You learned to do it
I learned
earlier.
to do it. But we weren't flooded. I think the water came over the ridge at Hires next door.
Mm.
But it didn't quite come over the ridge. It came up within 10 feet of the cottages at high tide.
But you didn't have any big waves or things like that with the
No,
hurricane?
we didn't have any really big waves. Just a lot of blowing salt and
Uh-huh.
salt
And the
spray. And
water gradually coming up higher and higher.
every time you looked at the Gulf, it would come up a little bit farther, and it receded just as fast. And the men, after they'd struggled with the shutters, went upstairs in the little garage apartment and played poker, I think, for the duration of the storm. But that was my first baptism of storms. It's the only real one. Though we had a number of close misses that year. And in succeeding years, we had far more storms than we have had lately. But 1960 was the first real,
That was the first
the
one we
only
got,
real
first one
storm
we got
we've
into.
had
Mhm.
since I've been down here. The one that really hit us head on. And that was Hurricane Donna. And by that time, there were quite a few people on the island.
Yeah, they took a census, 150 on Sanibel and 150 on
No, it was
Captiva.
100, I think 100 on Captiva.
Anyway, we were getting kind of crowded.
About
This is all
250
season.
altogether. I
Yeah.
think.
Was that many? Okay.
And those who had expressed a desire to leave the island, Paul Stalin kept a list of them and tried to notify them that the island was going to be vacated. And of course, there was no bridge at that time. It was a ferry, and they were going to take the ferries up the river. So they called us. We had everything just about boarded up and ready to leave. They called us from the ferry landing and said they're holding the last ferry for you. Come now, if you want to get off the island. Betty and Evelyn had left early.
Yeah, that same day, but
We
earlier.
left early and
We,
that
oh,
morning.
well, we were fortunate because we had closed down the restaurant, and the restaurant itself was put to bed
Mhm.
for a
Yeah, it
month's
was off
vacation.
season and we were closed.
And we were going to go to New York for some theater and so forth, for our vacation plans. And that was canceled out. And we had a new car.
Well, we had it practically loaded up, at least mentally,
You wanted to get it off the island.
and to get it off the island so it wouldn't blow away. Yeah.
So we decided to go off. Well, Tom Billheimer said we couldn't stay on island. No.
Yes, he grew up in Miami and had experienced some very bad ones in '36 and other times, and he was not about to stay there.
But you were telling about your escape from the island. They called you and
Oh yes, well we rushed down, we threw the children in the car and left,
Yeah, with
Leaving
dirty
food
dishes in the sink.
leaving food in the refrigerator too, which we regretted. But we left and we got off the island and we thought we'd go over to La Belle and we thought we'd stay at the Clewiston Inn, that's what we thought. Well, we got there and we looked so dreadful probably by that time that they didn't
have space for you. Huh?
didn't have space for us. So we went up to around Sebring, I think.
Mhm.
We stayed there the first night. encountered several Sanibel people there. Then the storm came back across. It started to blow. At that point, it started to blow in Sebring. So we got in the car and started on up toward Tallahassee. And you wound up in Gainesville, I think, didn't you? We wound up at, where did we wind up? Just east of Tallahassee somewhere.
Oh, that place where we always,
Perry.
Perry, that was where. And
That's
we,
the place I didn't want to be.
Yes, we thought it'd be nice if you came over and joined us, but you didn't want to. So we stayed there overnight. And on the way up, we heard on the radio that all the people had been evacuated who could be evacuated from Sanibel Island. The rest were stuck. And so we stayed in Sebring. Then when the hurricane came on back across the peninsula, we went up to Perry, stayed there overnight. Then started south and asked the state police if we could get through. They said, no, the Edison Bridge is out. The Edison Bridge has been demolished, so we thought.
Where'd you get the gasoline to do all of this?
Well, we got only as far as Orlando. That's as far as we could get because the power was off all through the south part of Florida. So we couldn't get gas any farther south than that.
yeah, the gas stations, you couldn't pump gas because they had no electricity.
That's right. So we stayed there overnight. Then we found we could get through to Miami. We went on down 27 to Miami, and I stayed in Miami with my sister-in-law and her family and the two little boys who were 2 and 4 and coming down with the flu. And my husband and older boy, who was 14, I guess.
In there.
Yeah, 14, 15. Came back to the island. And Betty and Evelyn had gotten back to the island before that.
No, they got there ahead of us because Tom went into our freezer and said, here, kids, help yourself.
The girls aren't
The
here.
girls aren't here and all this stuff's gonna spoil.
So we gave them all steaks.
He gave away all our steaks.
Left us the roast turkey or the turkey.
What's happening over here? Do we need to?
Well,
She wants us to talk about the old days with our grandfather and father and.
oh, that's
I'll
what
finish up on the hurricane.
Yeah, finish up on the hurricane first.
When we left you, you were,
on Hurricane Donna. What did, we talked about Barbara and the Billheimers, but not about us.
I was talking about Tom coming and taking the steaks out of the freezer.
Uh-huh.
I think.
But I remember with Barbara's little kids, we went out to see them, Betty and I, to see how they were coming along with their hurricane preparations and to tell them what we were going to do and so forth. And Tom was busy on the ladder putting up hurricane shutters, which we didn't have, so we didn't have to do that. And we talked about the hurricane, and I think it was Kim who said, "It's my hurricane."
Oh.
Possessive. Well, the first one he had, and hopefully the last. Yeah.
He was the one that had the flu.
And at any rate, when we came back, Tom and John were here, but their house was in disarray because of the numbers of trees and things that were down, but not any real physical damage. Our house had absolutely no damage, so Tom and John moved into the guest apartment, and Betty and I into the other house, along with Birgit Dickey. And Birgit Dickey was a long time, is still a friend of ours over a long period of years. We knew her then when she operated her dress shop on Periwinkle Way. And she didn't have water at her house, so that she came to stay with us.
Birgit's job was to ride the school bus and get ice. School bus used to go up and down the island.
Ice was the most
Ice was the
precious
most
commodity of
Yeah,
all.
I've forgotten where ice came from, but anyway, Birgit managed to come back with it one day.
No, but, and then we weren't allowed to use the school bus because of
Well, it
the
belonged to the government.
Department of Education found out we were using the school bus for public transportation, free transportation, so we had to find another source. Some people had cars on island, we didn't because we had to leave our car on the mainland, so it took the 10 days that it took to have the repairs done.
Clear the roads of trees and so forth.
And the ferry landing rebuilt, so that we were without a car, but we had them. Then we had eating with us our next door neighbors, Hayes and Churchill Hudson and their 2 little boys, because they lived at Sanibel and they didn't have water or food or anything else.
Power, probably.
Or power, yeah.
The power was
Uh-huh.
off for about 12 days, I think.
And then they had what was the artisan shop, which is now a real estate shop. And they came to have dinner with us. Now, we had Tom and John and Birgit and Hayes and Churchill and the 2 boys and Betty and I don't know whoever else that needed food. We had plenty of food in our freezers. We
cooked up a turkey dinner because.
Oh no, I think we cooked up the shrimp first before
I
that
guess we
because
did.
we had to get rid of the shrimp that we had put in the freezer. We had to dump. We had to dump the ice cream. That's when I learned never to have extra ice cream in your freezer because that's the worst to clean up.
Hurricane season, yeah, Barbie's reminding us that we had to, what did you say?
So you had a gas stove?
We had a gas stove, yeah, and we had 1 gas refrigerator.
That refrigerator was the important thing.
Yeah.
Because all the rest of the refrigerators on the island were
We're gone, ours was just a very small one, but we were able to keep a few things in it.
And we were on the,
And we had gas stoves to cook.
We had an artesian well, because, with a thank you to the Bells who owned the house next door to us, to the east of us, and they allowed us to have free water all the
Water, and there was enough pressure in an artesian well so that we didn't have to have electrical pumps to pump up the water.
And I think we had at least 10 5-gallon glass jars of
Drinking water.
Drinking water that we had in. We used that for drinking water because nobody liked the sulfur water, and so we had to have bottled water. And so everybody, all of the workmen who needed water came and picked up those bottles of water and brought back the empties for us. It was a share all the way through.
Community enterprise.
The Churchill and Hayes used the Strong's bathrooms, showers, in order to have showers because they had no water. They lived very simply anyway. But the Strongs offered their units because they had a well.
Well, the whole neighborhood used to go and get their showers down at Walt Strong's.
It's Whitecaps.
Whitecaps, yeah. I was trying to think of the name. Mm-hmm.
But it worked out fairly well. The Nutmeg House had the least damage of any of the restaurants. The whole roof was off, or the major part of the roof was off of the Coconut Grove restaurant, the Cantinas, so that they had long period of time in order to get that repaired. But we had some roofing damage. We had a couple of broken windows. The house was not damaged, as I said.
The floor of the restaurant was all peeled up.
Mm-hmm.
The tiles were all loose, where the water had come in through the broken windows.
The
But
dining room.
They settled
Dining
down.
room, yeah.
They settled down so that they got us open first, so that we could serve meals, so that tourism could get back into being, so people could earn their money.
Yeah.
And so that we were one of the first buildings repaired. We also had money in the bank to pay the repairs. They didn't have to wait for their money, we just got them paid right away, and so they were grateful for that, because then they could buy materials for the next house area to go on and so forth, so we went along very well. So we were in monetarily and physically in good shape, and we opened in mid-October, 15th of October, from the 10th of September to the 15th of October, we were open and going and cleaned up and ready. The whole island looked good that year, because all of the houses and cottages and so forth had to be repainted
It
and
was due to
cleaned
the
up.
sandblasting because of the wind.
All the paint was off.
The paint was flaked off.
Cottages, from the sand blowing.
But the most marvelous job to us that was done was the work of the men with all of their gasoline-powered saws. They all got in and cleaned the road so that the Lee County Electric could come in and repair the wires. And the men worked long days.
12-hour days sawing the great big Australian pines, which were down across Periwinkle Way.
And the only thing we could do was send sandwiches down and water.
We sent Johnny Billheimer down
For they saw.
with his saw. So I don't know if there's anything more we should say on
I
her.
think that's about all our recollections on the hurricane. We never could figure out what happened, because in our house, the house had no damage at all. It was right on it was on the water, and I had some water in a jewelry case that was in the on the closet shelf.
We did not have a high tide.
So only
The
thing-
eye of the storm came up and hit Naples, hit Bonita Beach, and swiped up the coast, and passed actually inside. We got only the edge of the eye, so the bay side got high tides, but the Gulf side did not get high tides.
We were lucky.
So we were very lucky. Otherwise, we'd have been underwater and much more damage.
Good it was a low tide. Oh, Barbara, you were going to tell about how your family started coming down on Sanibel long years ago.
Oh, well, my father had, my grandmother had grown up with Granny Matthews in Kentucky. Granny Matthews owned Island Inn, which in the beginning, of course, was a truck, had truck gardens and so forth. It was a farm, but my grandmother had known her. And my grandfather bought some land, not much, but a little land up the Caloosahatchee around Alva, sight unseen. And he decided he would come down and see what he had bought. So they took the train down, and I guess the train ended, the railway ended at Fort Ogden, and they had to get a cart and horse from there and come on down the Caloosahatchee. And they saw the land, which was not anything special, but it wasn't underwater anyway. But they decided to come on down to Fort Myers, and they stayed overnight with the English family up the river, and came on down to Fort Myers, and whom should they run into on the streets of Fort Myers but Granny Matthews. They hadn't known she was here, I guess, but my grandmother recognized her, and they got together. She invited them to come to Sanibel and visit and stay with her over there, so they did. That's how they started coming to Sanibel.
And when was that?
Well,
My father was
my
a
father
few,
was
like,
born in 1890, and he was 2, so
must have been 92.
must have been 92 or thereabouts, if that place is enough, yeah. Well, then the family, a couple of winters, rented a boat, a houseboat,
A houseboat.
which I don't know whether they anchored it off Captiva or they plied back and forth in the waters or what they did anyway, but my father told about one time when the weather turned very warm, getting up and seeing that the big crock of butter that they had laid in as a supply had melted, and the whole water all around the houseboat was covered with butter.
Greece.
Greece, yeah.
The waves were smoothed out.
Waves were smoothed out, yeah. So that was the beginning of our family on Sanibel, and that was always a dream to come back there. And when my father was getting ready to retire, he thought about buying some property down here. He wanted to have some place where he could sit on the porch with his hip boots on and direct traffic while my mother did all the work. So they bought land on the Gulf for $15 a front foot.
So it was $5 a front foot for 100 feet and $10 a foot for the second.
Well, that's where I got the
100 feet.
15 anyway. So
Bought it from Frank Bailey, yeah.
they bought 200 feet on the Gulf and built High Tide Motel. We were going to tell about my grandfather and the McCullough place, though.
Yes, before that, my grandfather and several other Cincinnati businessmen had gotten together and bought land, I guess, and built a fishing club over on the Bayside, which is now, and Charlie McCullough's grandfather was one of the men that had the McCullough Seed Company, I think, in Cincinnati. And he was one of the men, along with my grandfather, who belonged to the fishing club, and he eventually
Took over the house.
And bought the land, I guess, from whoever was left.
Charlie and Ann McCullough live there now, so that must have been a well-built house.
Must have been. But these men would come down on vacation and fish. And that's what started them really, well, in addition to their coming to visit Granny Matthews, they then, as Betty said, my father always loved it here and decided to buy land during the war.
Did they come down when you were small, or was it after you had finished college that they started coming back to the island?
I was in college, I think, because I was.
You were a baby when they first brought you down.
First brought me down when I was yeah.
You were a baby.
So they did. So I was. Barbara didn't get to come because she was too little, but I was 2 years old. So I was brought down for one winter. Stayed at the Island Inn just for a short time. I think my grandfather, my father's father, and my mother came down together with me. 3 generations. I don't exactly know why. I guess they were
But
just.
you had pneumonia, flu, pneumonia, and so forth during that period of time.
Got it down here, I
Or-
think.
or did you?
Grandfather had pneumonia, and you did too, I think.
I had
We
it.
were both
Oh.
sick down here.
Mhm.
That was the last time you came down for quite
Last
some
time
time.
I came down until 41.
Was your father? I was just wondering did your parents come down before that, during the 30s and so forth, or were they?
Just to stay at the Island Inn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they did.
They came. They were back and forth several times. I think. I don't know.
And stayed at the inn, yes.
Well, then in 1941, when war was declared, the general factotum at the Island Inn had to go to war. He was drafted. So Charlotta Matthews drafted me and a friend, Mary, well, it doesn't matter what her name was, Higgins is now, Winsboro, to come down and help Mary to operate the office at the Island Inn and I to operate the kitchen at the Island Inn, because for some reason they were short a kitchen manager also. So we took ourselves in hand and came down, gave up our jobs in New York City, 2 of us, happy for a winter in Florida. And that was great. We had a good time. Mary typed the menus, I wrote them out. Mary typed them in the office and ran the office, and we got to meet all the old Island Inn people, and I conjured up the menus and so forth with the help of the cook who had always been there at the Island Inn, who was perfectly capable of doing it by herself probably. But anywho, I was also to help make the salads because we had a new salad person. So I did that. And this went along quite well, and we were oblivious of the war down here until all of a sudden Barbara's intended was about to be drafted, and so she was about to be married real quickly. So what was to do but to quit the Island Inn right there, which was in the middle of March. We figured that by March everybody would have gone. We didn't realize that March was one of the heaviest months down here. But anyhow, we quit, Mary and I. I had to get up to Barbara's wedding. Mary went up to Tampa and bought a little Ford so we could get there, and we took off.
we would have killed a person who did
We would
that
have
to
killed
us.
the person who did that to us, yeah. Quit right in the middle of the season, but Charlotta was an old family friend and she understood, I guess. So we were sped along our way. We got as far as someplace in
Corbin,
Kentucky when the car broke down. I had to leave Mary to bring the car up north, and I caught the bus up to, no, was it a bus? Yeah, to Cincinnati. And Barbara had been working at American Airlines at Cincinnati, so I went in there and pled my cause. So they got me a space on a flight up to Detroit. And I made it for the wedding. I got there, I guess, the day before.
barely in time.
Barely in time, yeah. So that was the end of my employment in Florida until 1954 when I became self-employed in Florida.
When was that wedding? What year?
42,
Mm-hmm.
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 1942, it'd have to have been. Oh, what else? You've got some notes, the two of you.
Well, I don't have anything. Well, I have the school, about the school. Did you wish to know about the school when we first came down here?
Sure.
It was a one-room school, which is now the Pirate Playhouse.
No, it isn't.
No,
It's the old
it's
schoolhouse
the
theater.
schoolhouse theater now. It's one room plus a sort of a porch, a glassed-in porch on one side, which could make two rooms if necessary. A stove that cooked the children sitting next to it when it was lit, and while the rest of them froze. One teacher for 6 grades, no kindergarten, but first through the 6th grade went there. And there were 14 children the first year we came, which included my oldest boy. And he was in the 3rd grade when we came. There was a privy for a bathroom, privy out behind. There was a well with a pump and a communal cup for all the children to drink out of. And the school books did not match. There were no 2 books alike for any one grade. And a scarcity of books anyway. And a crazy teacher. Literally crazy. I kept trying to get Johnny to bring home some papers so I could see what he was doing, and kept asking him to. And finally I got a poison pen letter from the teacher saying, please do not ask for Johnny's papers. I do not believe in giving papers. I don't believe in giving grades because they make the children jealous of each other. Then the other parents sort of got together and we started popping in on her to see what was happening. Well, plenty was happening. It was a riot. The children were throwing pine nuts at each other and screaming and yelling and running around, and the teacher burst into tears whenever a parent came, so we finally got the superintendent of schools over here and said either she goes or the children go. And so we got Nancy McCann, who was a fixture for many years and a wonderful person, and she straightened things out. But for the rest of that year, that was a lost year. We lost a teacher. We forced her resignation about, I guess it was around Thanksgiving. No, around October, the latter part of October. And Ellie King took over from Thanksgiving till Christmas. Then we got a teacher to come in.
Did you have somebody's daughter-in-law that came and helped?
Yeah, the Captiva,
Yeah.
Jane
Jane
Hayford. Jane
Hayford.
Jane Hayford came in and taught for the balance of the year, and she
forgot
got things under control, and she, however, had majored in theater, and she had a kind of a degree for teaching children, but little children. But anyway, she did very well. We were thankful for her, and then for the following year we got Nancy McCann. That's how it was.
And she was a beloved teacher.
Yes, she was, and she was excellent. She kept order and taught them besides, and she
And had fun.
Played baseball with them.
played baseball with them, though there was just a very small lot mowed off or cleared. The rest of it was jungle. And she always pitched, and anybody who batted out of that yard was automatically out. Because not only would we lose the ball, but we were afraid of snakes. And there were snakes at that time on the island. There are very few now. I don't know if there are any, but
There have to be.
there were some rattlesnakes. There were some diamondbacks and some pygmy rattlers and also coral snakes at that time. We killed several coral snakes. Not at the school, but we did kill them on the island. And the telephone lineman killed rattlesnakes quite often. But now it's been cleared and very little jungle left, so
No snakes, no mosquitoes,
no mosquitoes either.
no fun.
You had some interesting arrangements for mosquito control at Casa Marina. Want to go over those?
All.
Well,
Due to a salesman that came in.
Yeah, due to a salesman that came in, we had a means of mosquito control. He came in discouraged. He'd been up and down the island trying to sell his magic thing. You plugged it in and you pushed a button and zzz, out came all the mosquito spray, which was harmless to people.
It was a pyrethrum.
Pyrethrum base,
Right.
greatest thing, and nobody would even listen to him. We said, wait a minute, don't get scary, we'll listen to you. So we bought one of these things.
$75, I think.
$75, yeah, it set us back.
When we were making $5 a day.
Making
so we
$5
paid
a day,
$75.
that was quite a bit, but it was worthwhile. It was worthwhile for the customers anyway. They used to come in droves, sweating with mosquitoes. The poor little kids would have sunsuits on, bare backs, and they'd be black with mosquitoes. You can't really believe it until you have seen it. But we'd line them up. We'd say, all right, line up there, and we'd get the zizzer and push the button, zzz, and the mosquitoes would all drop dead on the floor or on the table or anywhere they were, and everybody would be very happy. So that was our mosquito control.
And we bought one too.
You bought one too, yeah.
Now that we found out how good they were, we
I don't know where ours,
got one
what
too.
happened to ours. We used it for a long time while the mosquitoes got less, so we didn't need it that much.
The time
I
would
gave
go
it
around
to
and-
somebody, but I can't remember. It wasn't in working order, and I don't remember to whom I gave it. I may have given it to Raoul, our yard man.
Tom would tell all the people to stay in their cottages after dark, from dusk on, and he would go around and spray all the cottages, and as long as they stayed in, it was
Yeah,
comfortable.
it was dead-eye Dick on the mosquitoes.
No, we would carry it home with us. It was when we were living in Charlotte Kinsey's house, and we would use the little back screen porch
Or a
as
decontamination unit.
center, and we would take this and spray, and we would kill 100 mosquitoes that we would have brought into that porch and would have gone into the house with us. And I know we didn't have air conditioning there, and the screens and the beds were next to the windows in the house. It was a very small cottage, and my screen would be black with mosquitoes where my head was.
Literally, I can remember the two little boys' bedroom
Mhm.
where they were sleeping. The screens would be solid black. You could hear them singing.
Smell the people.
Oh, yes, indeed, those two little kids, and you could hear them singing, the mosquitoes singing, you know, in the other room. We had no air conditioning then, needless to say.
No,
I
so
didn't, yeah, I didn't
the
think
air conditioning was just coming in.
it was just coming in. I didn't see any point in air conditioning the restaurant. I said, all these people come down here, they spend their day on the beach. They don't need air conditioning, they're used to fresh air. But it turned out that Evelyn was right, we did need air conditioning. People came in
To sit down
Sit
when
down
you're
to a
dressed.
dressed in their good clothes and they didn't want to sweat it out. So it was a good investment in the long run.
Talk about Wayne Miller and when mosquito control started working.
Is that when we moved up to the Nutmeg house, Wayne Miller who was in charge of mosquito control for Lee County,
Still
was
is.
trying to justify all of the expense of his mosquito control plan,
Which included dredging.
which included dredging the low spots on the island so that they could maintain a
Constant water level.
as much as possible, with his knowledge that we didn't have mosquitoes if the water table was low, and we didn't have mosquitoes when the water table was high, but when we had fluctuating water table, why then we had mosquitoes. So by means of putting weirs in, he felt that we could have some kind of mosquito control that would work.
He was right.
And he was having a bad time in that period of time, and trying to obtain money to do all of these things. And I wrote a letter thanking him for the work that he had done. When he came out to talk to us and spoke with me and wanted to know if he could use the letter, and I said sure. He need to justify the expense, and it has been very, very expensive, all of this. But people still, I don't think, even today, people don't understand that if they're spraying overhead, it doesn't do much good. What they have to get the mosquitoes before they're adult, not afterwards, in order to control it. And people still think that they should have these planes going overhead all of the time, the new people.
And the fogger.
That fogger.
Used to have the fogger going up and down the island making noise and spraying.
In the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night, you'd hear the fogger coming and you'd rush to shut the window because this blast of insecticide would come in and practically choke you. But, well, that was what we used to say. It just made the mosquitoes mad. When you went out in the morning, they were more vicious than ever. But it did kill a certain number of them, of course.
And there was certain psychological
The
effect.
psychological effect was the
They
best
thought
thing.
something was being done about this.
Especially if you had guests, they didn't understand about all this digging and dredging that Wayne was doing, but they did understand what Kim used to call the pim-pim fogger. Knocked them dead.
Well, that's that lovely story about, reminds me again of the lovely story about Milbury Rushworth's wedding, when the fogger came through. Milbury was married in September.
Height of mosquito season.
Height of the mosquito season, before Wayne Miller was in operation. And the wedding was being held at the community church. And apparently they'd asked for help for the mosquitoes, but unfortunately the foggers came after the people were seated in the church waiting for the wedding rather than before. So here we are. We're sitting quietly waiting for the wedding to begin, and then fog went round and round.
And the fog rolled in, and
Fog rolled into the church.
Mrs. Cockrell piped up and said, "Wait till the clouds roll by." We were just waiting for the bride to enter.
That wedding was a social event of the season. Of course, we were, as we said, a very small group, and anything that happened to any one person in the group involved all of us. So everybody on the island turned out for Milbury and Jack to get married. We were all assembled in the church. I say, when first the fogger came, then there was a stir at the back, and everybody started to get up. And who was it? Francis Bailey came out and said,
So I shouted, "Sit down, it's only the bride's mother."
"Only the bride's mother, you don't have to get up now." Well, the bride was quite a bit late.
And after the service, it was the Reverend Mr. Brown from the Episcopal Church on the mainland that came to have the service. After the service, I got out, and Pauline Bailey was crying. I said, "Pauline, what's the matter?" And she said, "You'd be upset and crying too if you had to wait for Milbury, who was just putting on nail polish when she was supposed to be in the church for the wedding." And Milbury said to me, "It's my wedding, I can be late if I want to."
So she was. And we sat there getting hotter and hotter.
And then the lovely story afterwards from Mrs. Cockrell, who you had just mentioned, Barbara. Mrs. Cockrell's we were there, and Milbury's mother wanted us to be, because we were unmarried. All of the unmarried girls,
This was at the reception.
including her mother, who was
This was
divorced.
at the reception. This
At
was
the
at the reception at the beach house.
Was to be there to
Catch the bouquet.
catch the bouquet, the old-fashioned things that one did. And Jack Cole's daughter caught the bouquet, and Mrs. Cockrell said, "Isn't it nice? She can use that next week when she's getting married."
Then we had to see Jack and Milbury off the island, and their car broke down.
Well, that was the rainy season. They got stuck in the mud.
Got stuck in the mud. Down behind, well, off Center Street.
You know, down Palm Road and in that area.
Yeah, in that area. I guess the car was parked down there
Then
so they could make a
hidden.
quick getaway, and they couldn't get away. So instead of getting off the island in their own car, they went out and flagged the school bus, which was coming down the island, and
Started off on their honeymoon.
started off on their honeymoon on the school bus, which took them into town. Where they got from there, I don't know. Have to ask Milbury.
Yeah,
She'll tell you.
We'll be sure to ask them.
Yeah.
ask Milbury about it, you know.
Now, what more, ladies?
What have we forgotten?
You were talking about your various Roy Bazier and Jean LaBeouf and various waitresses.
Various people that worked for us at the Nutmeg House.
Yeah,
And Mrs. Scribner.
Oh,
What's the,
Mrs. Scribner. Oh, we had many interesting people on island. We had many interesting people who worked with us. One was Roy Bazier, who was a graduate of the University of Iowa, who had some unfortunate experiences and came down from Washington, D.C. He was writing financial.
well, I don't know, but he was working for a bank, and they wouldn't let him work there unless he cut his hair, and he was darned if he was going to.
No, he wouldn't let him work there unless he grew hair.
Unless they grew hair, that's right. I was thinking that didn't quite go with Roy. So he quit
Yeah.
and came to
But
Sanibel.
then after that, he had some kind of a financial paper that he would, or information out of Washington.
That's right,
Political
yeah. but
paper or something.
Anyway,
And something happened with the partnership there, so he came down here.
he was our first real waiter. In fact, he did everything.
You know, he had to earn a living, he had to be, and one thing we could do was feed him, which he needed.
Yeah, food and a very small salary, because nobody got very big salaries those days. But
So what, at $5 a day or something like that, we didn't have many. That was only in the summer. By the time we built the Nutmeg House, we had enough money not to have to have more than a $10,000 loan from the banks in order to build the house and the restaurant. So in the few years here,
we had sold our house up north too, which was helpful.
we had some of our own money, but it wasn't we never had a very
Not a big
one.
investment, never.
Well, Father Mann was a hostess for you too, one time on the,
Well, Father Madden was the hostess he was the cashier.
oh,
He was the cashier, that was much later on, but Father Madden, after his retirement, wanted to work up Social Security for himself. So we were to pay him a nominal amount, in return for which he was to come in the evening and take cash. Well, Father Madden delighted in this.
And he had to have something to do.
He had to have something to do, and all his former parishioners came in, and of course he could always remind them to be sure and go to church on Sunday, and here's some cash, put it in the collection plate, and so forth. But he had a great time. He was sort of a mixed blessing, because when he couldn't find the right change in the cash box, or too busy talking or something, he used to make change out of his own pocket, and that sort of confused our records, but didn't matter that much.
No, I think we ended up with about $200 unaccounted for over 20 years
That is,
of working.
How
We-
about your
we
banking
had-
arrangements with
Hmm?
Bailey's, your banking
Oh.
arrangements with Bailey's?
Yeah, in order, during our tenure of restaurant operation, there was no bank on island. It came the year that we sold the business. So we had to go over town to do our banking. We took Thursdays off because, or closed the restaurant because that was the one day that we had no deliveries in the early days, and that we
You
could
kept on
manage to
with
be
Thursday.
free. So that we would do all of our routine chores on that day. During the wintertime, our mothers would take care of them, but in the summer that we did. On Thursdays, we would get $1,200 in cash, in $1 bills and quarters and dimes and so forth.
Mhm.
On Sundays, Francis Bailey would be out of money, over the weekend, Saturday, so he would come and get some of my cash in order to get through the weekend. And he would go to the bank on Monday, and then I could go and get cash
money
from him for my remainder of the week, and thereby we were one another's bankers.
We were bankers for an awful lot of other people too.
Yeah, yes, during the winter season especially, there were a lot of people who would write us a check for $100 and pick up $100 in cash on Tuesday and Wednesday nights. And we would be able to give them, not the loose change or the dollars which Francis wanted, but the $20s. We could give them in that money so that they would have money to have on hand. So it was a helping one another scene all the way through in those early days.
But it could
We
have
just
been a
had
little,
to.
could have been a little
We
scary.
needed one another and badly needed one
Yeah.
another at times. We would borrow, we'd borrow ice cream from the Island Inn, and the Island Inn would come down and borrow things from us. We would
Somebody
get-
down the line had butter chips the same size we used. We used to borrow them.
And so I think Cook and Grove we could borrow butter from all the way.
Somebody-
So then we would all pool our resources and get along well.
How about some of your guests?
Some of the guests.
You
She
had
wants to
some
know about some of the
Oh,
guests.
yeah, Mrs. Scribner was our most famous guest, I guess. She's the one that everybody else asks about, and even today they ask what, they remember the lady with the hats and what's happened to her. Well, Mrs. Scribner is no longer living. But she, and her husband had a cottage, winters at White Heron up on Sanibel Captiva Road. Her husband died, so she decided that because she liked to eat at the Nutmeg House, that she would buy a house, and bought a house in Palm Lake subdivision so that she could come and have dinners with us. And she ate limited kinds of food, so we had to have something prepared for her that we knew she could eat. And that worked out very well for us because we always knew what she would take more or less. And we could feed her fast, and she would eat her meal, and we could have her table ready for 6:30 for the first of the second seating or the last of the first seating.
But she had a number of hats.
She had a number of hats, and she
Different
had to have a footstool underneath or someplace to put her feet, and she wanted a table for 4 instead of a table for 2 for a single person, because she wanted to sit next to the organ and talk to Billy Saxinger, who was playing the organ, and wanted to be able to watch everything. So she greeted everybody. Since she was there, she was unofficial hostess of the Nutmeg House too, because everybody would stop and say hello to Mrs. Scribner. And she knew most everybody, and everybody knew her.
Yes, and
And
to this day, if you mention that you were at the Nutmeg House or something comes up in the conversation, somebody is bound to say, "What happened to the lady with the hats?"
And Mrs. Scribner, we also had to give a special parking space to, so she parked with the crew, all of the employees in their cars. And the boys would always back her car out for her, so they watched when she was ready to go home. They all knew her.
Well, she was a regular guest.
They all liked her too.
Talking about guests, though, I remember with great fondness the very cold, rainy day when Robert Frost and a companion dropped in for lunch. And it was so cold and so rainy that nobody else came, and we drew up chairs around the same table and sat and chatted with him and his guest. It was a real heartwarming experience. It was heartwarming more than one way. We were right against the heater. The only place you could be comfortable in the whole building.
That was before we had air conditioning.
Before we had air conditioning,
had
yeah.
heat,
Uh-huh.
centralized heat, so we had a gas
Yes,
heater there.
heater. It was back in the real old days in the beginnings. Then we had a lot of other important guests. You've got a list of them.
You know, well, it's not many. I would say we were very fond of the Lilienthals, who used to eat with us fairly regularly when they were here and staying at Shalimar. And
You know,
they
he
would
was
walk
doing
over.
his research on the atom bomb.
I
We didn't know
I don't
about
know
that.
I don't think it was after that, but they were a nice and pleasant.
And then the people that used to teach their children.
All the Fatimans and the Fatiman children are now on island, but when they were kids when they were with us, and so I remember that.
Clifton Fadiman was famous as the host on What's My Line? Or
Or at any rate, he used the menu to teach the children, and they would ask or tell them how to say it in French or in German, etc., and working on whatever it was. And he used, once I was near and he was teaching them math by using a little half pint of milk, talking about triangles and
Squares.
et cetera, and squares and so forth. And the children were probably 4 years old or so, somewhere in that age.
They were young, but they were absorbing.
4 and 6. But they were quiet children, and the family were a unit together, enjoying dinner out and enjoying one another. The children weren't troublesome. But throughout my period of watching over the dining room, watching over the activities and people and things, I had problems with only 2 families with children that I couldn't control. And I asked both families to please have their children sit down because they were getting in the way of the waitresses and so forth, and both families got up and left.
Thank goodness.
So I guess
Thank goodness, yeah.
and one time at the Nutmeg House, everybody clapped when they heard me do the. The only other bad thing that happened, one man called for a reservation, and I said to him, "Sir, I cannot honor a reservation for you because I don't have a waitress that will wait on you. You have been late. You have upset their routines. We have waited for you for 6:30, and you came at 7:30, and they've lost money on the table, and nobody wants to take care of you." And he came back once and threw his hat in, and he said, "Can I come in? I'm a guest this time." I guess he wasn't mad. It takes a lot to get me angry or upset about things, but
But isn't it nice to be the boss?
But you know, if you're the boss, you can do it. If you're not, you can't. But what we did to help this to some extent was to provide a small bookcase in the area where we had the organ and our fireplace and and a foyer. And I would have some toys and
His cartoon.
leftovers from the Billheimer boys, and I would leave them there. And if the children were had to wait for the dinners and things were things were sort of boiling a little bit, I would go get books if they were at the table, or I would give the children toys and put them in the area where the waiting area and tell them that they could not bring the toys where the waitresses were, but they could play there. And this would quiet them down for the most part. And it worked. It really worked. I don't know if any restaurant today does that, but we just had a bookcase. We let the families take the toys or the books home, and I just told them put them in the mailbox the next day. Don't, because the children would kick up a fuss. And they always return them. I had bird books. We had Audubon magazines and National Geographics and things like that around too, all kinds of things. And they could borrow the bird books and leave them. So I had several of them around to help the occasional person so they could enjoy the island. And basically it worked. I came out of working all of these years and decided that 99% of the people are nice. A few are stinkers. And there weren't many in our
Not many
restaurant.
stinkers, Well, if they were, they get weeded out.
What stinkers at high tide?
Have any
I
stinkers?
can't remember any stinkers. I think we were our own bosses there too. We didn't have to take people if we didn't like them. We used to phrase the Bennies and would say, I think you'll find your level somewhere else.
We used to have some people that left the place in a horrible mess, but they were
Oh, yes,
usually the
we
nicest
did.
people.
Yes, there were some of the nicest people and they were well worth it.
Mm-hmm.
But no, we really, people didn't take things either. We didn't lose anything. I've gotten even a washcloth back in an envelope mailed back. Things like that.
Everybody used to worry about our carrying the amount of money that we had. Sometimes I would have
$3,000 or $4,000.
$1,000 in my purse that I would take to church and so forth. Roy labeled it Fort Knox, so everybody knew I carried it.
But there was never any problem.
No problems, and the family were worried about our going home at night. And we did put a nightlight finally, but it wasn't for the money. It was because we made a pair of alligator eyes as we were walking home one night, going back around the restaurant, because we had a slew with us, and we decided that probably it wasn't wise not to have it lighted. And so that we put it up for that, and Tom and Barbara were happy that we had that. And of course, and it was useful for when we had our mothers with us at night, that they
yes.
needed light to go home in for walking purposes. We just found our way.
I used to have books disappear once in a while. We had bookcases in all of our units with books in, but people would be in the middle of reading something, want to take it home, finish it, and it would come back in the mail.
Yeah.
Almost
Yeah.
always.
We still, and Barbara still is in contact with an enormous amount of friends.
Yeah, and a lot of them have moved to Sanibel, people who came to stay with us too.
Yes.
Lots of them.
The Redmonds just came in to the library. You know, we work on Fridays, and last Friday they came and said, we're here, so I've got to find a time when we can have the Redmonds for dinner and have a conversation. So we're still, our guests are our friends, and it remains that. And this particular time of year is a difficult one for us because we have a lot of people who are around at this time of year. And it was that way. I would introduce people, and they became friends. If I had a couple of couples that were seated together and
Adjoining tables.
tables and so forth, I would introduce them. Or some of our guests would ask to be introduced to various people. And it worked out. They became friends and enjoyed one another, and they would table hop. And it may be that way today still, that this is a friendly place, and people enjoy being here. We had a lot of people who liked to eat at 6:30 at night, but that was because they wanted to go through Ding Darling first and then come in and have dinner afterwards, so that 6:30 was the prime time, but that was the hardest time for us because it cut into we opened at 6 o'clock, and we could only save a few tables to 6:30 in order to be able to take care of everybody. And basically we had 3 seatings, one at 6, one at 7, 7:15, 7:30, and then and the next seating was
That's when she got in under the door.
and then close to 9 o'clock before the last of the third seating would get in, somewhere around that period of time.
Well, it was mostly by reservation, and we learned to sort of gauge by knowing our customers how long they were going to sit and talk.
Mm-hmm.
The rule of thumb was that a group up to 4 will get through in
an hour.
In an hour. 6 will get through in an hour and a half.
Or 2 hours.
And
8 takes all night. 8 or 10 takes all night. And we didn't like those big groups. We lost money on those.
2 would always get through in an hour. 4 would be maybe an hour and a half. You knew your customers and how fast they ate and whether they talked a lot or whether they were tending to business and shoveling it down, going to get out for the next one. Like Mrs. Scribbler's getting through by 6:30. That was always a big help. We could sell her table twice in the first hour.
Yeah.
Well,